Everyone called me crazy for marrying him. A waitress with a tech billionaire? They said I was after his money. But when he stood up at our wedding and revealed the real reason he chose me, the entire room went silent. The truth about our connection changed everything. Before I tell you this incredible story, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Trust me, you won't want to miss stories like this one. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. My name is Sienna, and 6 months ago, I was just another waitress trying to make ends meet. I worked the late shift at Murphy's Diner on 5th Street. You know, one of those places that's been around forever with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that's been sitting too long. The pay was terrible, barely enough to cover my tiny studio apartment, but it was honest work. Every night I'd count my tips and dream about something bigger. I wanted to open my own bakery someday, a cozy little place where people could feel at home. I'd been saving every penny for 3 years, but it felt like I was moving backward instead of forward. It was a Tuesday night in October when everything changed. The rain was coming down so hard you could barely see across the street, and the diner was practically empty except for old Mr. Peterson reading his newspaper in the corner booth. I was wiping down tables and thinking about how I'd have to ask my landlord for another extension on rent when the door chimed. In walked this man, completely soaked from the storm. His hair was dripping, his expensive-looking coat was ruined, and he had this lost expression on his face like he didn't know where else to go. He sat down at table 7, right in my section, and just stared out the window at the rain. I brought him a menu and a hot cup of coffee without him even asking. "Rough night," I said, trying to be friendly. He looked up at me with these tired brown eyes and gave me the saddest smile I'd ever seen. "You could say that," he replied quietly. Something about his voice made me pause. He sounded so alone, so broken. I asked if he was okay, and for a moment I thought he might actually tell me what was wrong. Instead, he just ordered pie and more coffee. We talked for about an hour that night. Nothing deep, just simple conversation about the weather, the diner, life in the city. He was polite, soft-spoken, and seemed genuinely interested when I mentioned my dream of opening a bakery. Most customers don't really listen when you talk, but he did. When he left, he tipped me $20 on a $6 bill and said thank you like I'd done something special. I watched him disappear into the rain and figured I'd never see him again. But I was wrong. He came back the next week. Same table, same quiet demeanor. Then again the following Tuesday. It became a pattern. Every Tuesday night around 10 o'clock, he'd show up, order coffee and pie, and we'd talk. Slowly, our conversations started getting deeper. He'd ask about my family, my dreams, what made me happy. I found myself looking forward to Tuesdays, wondering what we'd talk about next. There was something magnetic about him, this gentle sadness mixed with genuine curiosity about my life. I started to care about this mysterious stranger who seemed to find comfort in our little corner of the world. 3 months into our Tuesday night routine, everything I thought I knew about my mysterious customer came crashing down. It was a quiet February evening when he walked in looking different somehow, more nervous than usual. He ordered his regular coffee and apple pie, but barely touched either. I could tell something was weighing on him heavily. Finally, after an hour of small talk that felt forced, he looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Sienna, I need to tell you something important." My heart started racing. Was he married? Moving away? Sick? I sat down across from him, something I'd never done before during my shift, and waited. "My name isn't just Nathan," he said slowly. "It's Nathan Cross." The name hit me like a lightning bolt. Even someone like me who barely followed business news knew that name. Nathan Cross, the tech genius who'd built an empire from nothing, the billionaire who was always on magazine covers and business shows. I stared at him in complete shock, my mouth hanging open like an idiot. "You're joking," I whispered, but I could see in his eyes that he wasn't. "The Nathan Cross? The one who owns Crosstech?" He nodded, looking almost ashamed. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, my voice barely audible. He reached across the table and gently took my hand. Because for the first time in years, someone was talking to me like I was just a person. Not my money, not my success, not what I could do for them. Just me. What happened next felt like something out of a fairy tale, except fairy tales don't happen to girls like me. He told me he'd been coming to the diner not just for the coffee or pie, but because I made him feel human again. He said our conversations were the only thing that brought him peace. Then, in that little diner booth with the flickering fluorescent light above us, Nathan Cross asked me to marry him. I thought I was dreaming. This kind, lonely man who'd become such an important part of my week was asking me to be his wife. Not because of some grand romantic gesture or because we'd been dating for years, but because we'd found something real in those Tuesday night conversations. I said yes, though I'm still not sure how I managed to get the word out. The moment our engagement hit the news, my life became a nightmare. Reporters camped outside my apartment building. My phone wouldn't stop ringing with calls from tabloids offering money for my story. But worse than the media attention was how people I'd known my whole life started treating me. My own sister called me a gold digger. Friends I'd had since high school suddenly stopped returning my calls. Coworkers whispered behind my back about how I'd trapped a billionaire. Social media was brutal. Thousands of strangers called me every horrible name you can imagine, saying I was using him, that I didn't deserve him, that I was just a greedy waitress who'd won the lottery. The hate was overwhelming, and some days I wondered if I'd made a terrible mistake. 6 weeks later, we stood at the altar of a small chapel overlooking the ocean. I'd wanted something simple, just close family and friends, but even with only 50 guests, I could feel the judgment in the room. Nathan's business associates sat stiffly in their expensive suits, whispering among themselves. Some of my own family members looked embarrassed to be there, like they were attending a circus instead of a wedding. The few friends who'd stuck by me seemed uncomfortable around all the wealth and prestige. I felt like everyone was waiting for this whole thing to fall apart. As we exchanged vows, I caught glimpses of people checking their phones, probably reading the latest tabloid headlines about us. One article that morning had called me the luckiest waitress in America, with a photo of me looking tired after a long shift. Another suggested Nathan was having some kind of breakdown, and that's why he was marrying so far beneath his station. The words stung more than I wanted to admit, and I found myself questioning whether we were doing the right thing. After the ceremony, Nathan surprised everyone by asking for the microphone. Wedding speeches weren't planned, and I saw his business manager looking panicked. "I know many of you are wondering why I'm here today," Nathan began, his voice carrying across the silent room. "Why I chose to marry Sienna, a woman most of you had never heard of until 6 weeks ago." My cheeks burned with embarrassment, but Nathan squeezed my hand reassuringly. "3 years ago, I lost my younger brother Michael in a car accident," he continued, and I watched as the expression on every face in the room changed from judgment to shock. Nathan had never told me about his brother, and I could see how hard this was for him to share. Michael was my best friend, my business partner, and the only family I had left. After his funeral, I fell into the darkest place I'd ever been. Success meant nothing. Money meant nothing. I felt completely alone in the world. The room was now completely silent. Even the servers had stopped moving. On October 15th, 3 years after Michael died, I made a decision that I was going to end my life that night. I had it all planned out. But first, I wanted one last cup of coffee, one last piece of pie, somewhere quiet where no one would recognize me or want anything from me. I felt tears starting to fall as I realized where this story was going. I walked into Murphy's diner in the rain, broken and ready to give up on everything. And this woman, he turned to look at me with eyes full of love. This beautiful, kind woman brought me coffee and asked if I was okay. Not because she knew who I was or what I was worth, but because she saw another human being who was hurting. By now, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Sienna saved my life that night, and every Tuesday night after, without even knowing it. The silence that followed Nathan's speech felt like it lasted forever. Then, slowly, I heard quiet sobs coming from different parts of the room. Nathan's stern business associates were wiping their eyes. My sister, who hadn't spoken to me since the engagement, was crying openly. Even the photographer had stopped taking pictures and was just listening with tears streaming down her face. Nathan's best man, someone I'd been intimidated by all day, stood up and started clapping. Soon the entire room was on their feet, applauding not for the billionaire and his unlikely bride, but for two people who'd found each other in the darkness and brought each other into the light. In that moment, everything changed. The judgment, the whispers, the assumptions about who I was and why we were together, it all melted away because everyone finally understood that our love story wasn't about money or status. It was about human connection in its purest form. The weeks that followed were completely different from the nightmare of our engagement period. The same media outlets that had called me a gold digger now wanted to share our real story. We did one interview together, and Nathan talked about mental health, about the importance of treating everyone with kindness, about how the smallest gestures can have the biggest impact. The video went viral, but this time for all the right reasons. People started sharing their own stories of unexpected kindness, of moments when a stranger's compassion changed their life. My relationship with my family slowly healed. My sister apologized and admitted she'd been jealous and scared of losing me to a world she didn't understand. Friends who distanced themselves reached out, embarrassed by how quickly they'd believed the worst about me. But honestly, I understood. The whole situation had been so surreal that even I sometimes couldn't believe it was real. Nathan kept his promise to support my dreams. 6 months after our wedding, we opened Sienna's Kitchen in the space next to Murphy's Diner. It's exactly what I'd always envisioned: warm, welcoming, filled with the smell of fresh bread and homemade pies. But more than that, it's become a place where people feel safe to be themselves, just like Nathan did all those Tuesday nights. We hire people who need second chances, and we never close our doors to someone who just needs a warm place to sit and a kind word. Our story taught me that we never know when we might be the light someone needs in their darkest moment. That Tuesday night when I brought Nathan coffee and asked if he was okay, I was just being human. I had no idea I was saving a life. Now, every day I try to remember that the person in front of me might be fighting a battle I know nothing about, and maybe, just maybe, a little kindness from me could be exactly what they need to keep going.